Right now on Currents News, scores are being tallied for the tablet's COVID relief fundraiser, with Catholic schools anxiously waiting to hear if they'll take home the big money prize. Plus, New York's governor announces most COVID-19 capacity restrictions will be lifted by the 19th. Pope Francis kicked off a prayer marathon to end the pandemic and is calling on you to help. And one archbishop says Catholics who support abortion should not accept communion. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. We are currently waiting for a winner. Catholic academies throughout Brooklyn and Queens competed to sell the most subscriptions or renewals to the tablet newspaper, and a big prize is hanging in the balance. Both the top-selling school and the top-selling student will get a $3,000 bonus. Currents News' Emily Drewby checked in at St. Athanasius in Bensonhurst, where they are anxious to hear the results.
A real page-turner, a nail-biter, a close race. The tablet's COVID relief fundraiser, the contest is now closed and the scores are being tallied. Noelle Pianoforte thinks her school, St. Athanasius, has a good shot at winning. She personally sold over 25, big money for her and her school.
What made me want to sell so many is so I could raise money for my school.
Of the $20 sale, $5 goes to the school and $10 goes to the student, money that can be a big relief.
They could help their parents pay their tuition with that. And it would be it's a great incentive for the kids to do it, help mom and dad out. Everybody's struggling in this COVID time.
Monsignor David CASSATO is the vicar for Catholic schools and the pastor of St. Athanasius in Bensonhurst.
And it was a great competition. Many people participated, and I'm praying that St. Athanasius is the highest school.
Of 52 schools, St. Athanasius has emerged as a major contender for the top prizes, thousands of dollars. That's because of students like Noelle. She wants to make sure other kids get to have the same amazing experience she had.
I wanted to raise money so we could, for the other kids that are coming into the school, for new kids, so they could have as much fun as we did.
But Principal Diane Compatello says no matter what, they're coming out winners.
Even if we don't win as the highest school, we've won in many other ways, and getting our children to work together toward a common goal and to instill in everybody that you can help.
Just as importantly, they had fun.
We had so many limitations on so many things. To be excited about something together as a school community is something beautiful to see.
Orders are still being tallied, but a winner will be named by the end of the month. In Bensonhurst, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
So exciting. Most capacity restrictions in New York will end by May 19th. Governor Andrew Cuomo making the announcement on Monday. The news coming while the positivity rate dropped below 1.5% over the weekend for the first time since October. The governor says an increase in vaccinations is behind the drop. The 7-day positivity rate for New York City was about 1.78%. As the rates fall, New York City announces the subway will once again run 24 hours a day starting May 17th. Right now, the trains are stopped between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. for cleaning. The move comes after Mayor Bill de Blasio vowed to open the city fully in July. Officials still plan to continue the $300 million a year cleaning effort for years to come. However, the United States is unlikely to reach herd immunity. More contagious COVID-19 variants are spreading, and many Americans remain reluctant to get vaccinated, experts now believe. Instead, scientists say the virus will only become more manageable. Currently, just under half of Americans have received one dose of a coronavirus vaccine, and about a third are fully vaccinated, according to the CDC. Earlier in the pandemic, scientists had estimated that herd immunity would be reached when 60 to 70% of people either had natural immunity from prior infection or immunity through vaccination. A year later, that estimate had risen to at least 80%, largely due to highly transmissible new mutations. Meanwhile, Dr. Robert Tabali of the Catholic Medical Association says he believes we're already experiencing some degree of herd immunity.
So we have vaccine immunity and natural immunity, and most of the country has experienced one of those or the other. We had a precipitous decline in infections and death, and we've been plateauing for a while, and recently we've experienced declining on the plateau. So this is further evidence of some degree of widespread immunity in the population.
Dr. Tabali says while we can't predict that people will never get infected with another variant, he says if they do, most will have a less severe infection. The Coast Guard has suspended the search for victims of a capsized boat that was suspected of smuggling migrants into the U.S. At least 3 people were killed and 20 were taken to the hospital. The boat broke apart off the coast of San Diego Sunday morning. The captain of the boat is now in custody. 2 Navy sailors jumped into the water to help save people from the wreck. They both happened to be at Cabrillo National Monument when the boat tipped over. The active duty rescue swimmer for the Navy said he and another man who's in training to become a SEAL saw the people in the water and instantly knew what to do.
Before we jumped in the water, we looked at each other and said, all right, I'm comfortable with going into the water, going into the shore break, and the washing machine effect is what we call it. And he's like, yeah, I'm good for it too. So we both smiled at each other and we jumped in and did what we had to do.
They used parts of the destroyed boat to create places for people to stay afloat in the water. The White House is reuniting a handful of migrant families who were separated at the southern border during the Trump administration. 4 families are being reunited this week in what the Department of Homeland Security calls the beginning of a broader effort. The parents will return to the U.S. on humanitarian parole while authorities consider longer-term forms of legal status. More than 1,000 migrant families are still separated. The Department of Defense is canceling contracts for border wall construction that used funds originally meant for the military. Back in 2019, the Trump administration dipped into Pentagon dollars to build additional border barriers that Congress refused to fund. Now the Biden administration is attempting to redirect what is left of the $3.6 billion back into the Pentagon. The Archbishop of San Francisco is calling on pastors to refuse the Eucharist to public figures who support abortion. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone made the statement as a growing number of Catholics call on the church to deny President Joe Biden communion because of his stance on abortion. In his pastoral letter, the Archbishop wrote, "No one may share the Eucharist with us unless he believes what we teach is true, unless he is washed in the regenerating waters of baptism for the remission of his sins, and unless he lives in accordance with the principles given us by Christ." Countries around the world are speeding up deliveries of medical supplies to India. Lines are stretching outside of hospitals and vaccination centers in the country. Sunday, the U.S. delivered 1,000 oxygen cylinders, which has been in very short supply to Indian hospitals. Saturday, the nation reported more than 400,000 new cases and almost 3,700 deaths. Over at the Vatican, Pope Francis kicked off a month-long prayer marathon to end the pandemic. Throughout the month, the Rosary will be prayed from a different Marian shrine every day. Justin McClellan has the plan.
Pope Francis led the first Rosary of the month. It was held in the Gregorian Chapel inside St. Peter's Basilica. The chapel features a 7th century icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, one of the oldest images in the basilica.
Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Tu sei benedetta fra le donne, e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù.
Several families were in attendance, creating a sense of unity among all those present during the prayer.
Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Tu sei benedetta fra le donne, e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù.
Before closing the prayer, the Pope prayed to the Virgin Mary for those most suffering from the effects of the pandemic. He specifically referred to the extreme situations of those in isolation, from women being exposed to abuse to feelings of loneliness among the sick and elderly.
Vergine Maria, volgi a noi I tuoi occhi misericordiosi in questa pandemia del coronavirus e conforta quanti sono smarriti e piangenti per I loro cari morti, sepolti a volte in un modo che ferisce l'anima.
The Pope also prayed for the protection of doctors and nurses, aid in overcoming the economic crisis, and for a radical change in the way the world spends money. Pope Francis ended the prayer by blessing 30 rosaries, which will go to the different shrines in which the rosary will be prayed each day throughout the month at 6 p.m. Rome time.
That was Justin McClellan reporting. There's a lot more news headed your way. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, and students are showing how thankful they are.
She encourages us to be better and overcome our challenges.
Coming up, we meet the woman who made sure her students got the education they deserved during the pandemic. Plus, the Blessed Carlo Acutis would have been 30 years old today, and now a new book is giving more personal insight into his life. The Papal Foundation is giving $9 million to charitable foundations in the Middle East. And investigators are looking into the deadly stampede at an Israeli religious festival.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
It's Teacher Appreciation Week, and we're honoring educators in the diocese who are making a difference for their students. Today, we spotlight one woman who, after decades of teaching, had to go into unfamiliar territory to make sure her students got the education they deserve. Emily Drewby spoke with her and her students at St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Academy in Astoria.
You have to start with the number 8.
From tepid about technology to tackling technology, Patricia CAVERA did a 180 this year, all for her students.
After 13, what do you get?
For 25 years, she has taught in Catholic schools, a product of several herself. Here at her current school, St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Academy in Astoria, Queens, she's beloved.
She encourages us to be better and overcome our challenges.
She's very good at explaining herself and to teaching others.
She'll always stop in the middle of any type of subject lesson to help if a student is lost.
Overcoming challenges, something she also did this year. Patricia's principal says she was always iffy about technology until the pandemic hit. Already a difficult year.
I think everybody felt it, and especially the children that are, experiencing this.
Patricia knew she needed to step up and learn for the sake of her students. So she did, learning to use the school's virtual whiteboard system, meaning she can seamlessly teach students in this classroom and in this one, and virtually too. And still, with half the face-to-face time, students can rely on her.
She's gonna be there teaching me, helping me when I need it, and that I don't have to worry too much about if I make some mistakes because she will help me understand.
Her tenacity and drive makes her an inspiration to fellow teachers.
Nothing seems to frazzle her, nothing seems to faze her. She's always very calm and composed, and just the way she speaks and talks to the kids and parents, that's a trait that every teacher wants to have, and I hope to have, that one day.
What fuels Patricia? That this isn't just a job.
I'm blessed to be here because it doesn't feel like work.
It's a family, and you always go above and beyond for your family. In Astoria, Queens, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
And the Bishop of Brooklyn couldn't let the day go by without sending teachers his own personal thank you.
Without them, our schools would not have been open. We have a debt of gratitude to them. We hope that in some way in the future we can make it up to them for the sacrifices they made over and beyond what they normally do to make sure our schools are open. I'm sure our children and their families appreciate everything as I do personally. Thank you so much.
Students across the diocese are preparing special events for their own teachers just to show them how much they appreciate all their hard work throughout this turbulent year. The students at Our Lady of Grace Catholic Academy in Brooklyn kicked off their celebration today. Teachers were welcomed Monday morning with their classroom doors elaborately decorated and decked out with letters from students thanking their teachers for all the hard work they put in during the pandemic. Spring is in full force, and St. Athanasius Church in Brooklyn is kicking off the baseball season with a parade. With the NYPD marching band leading the way, future baseball stars can be seen marching towards the St. Athanasius baseball field in what may be the first parade in New York City since the pandemic started. You may remember this moment back in October when Carlo Acutis was beatified. Today, the first millennial who could become a saint would have turned 30 years old. A book about his life, Millennial in Paradise, is set to be released next month. Here to talk more about it is Michael Lichens, editor of the nonprofit media organization Catholic Exchange. And Michael, Carlo died at just 15 years old. How did he become holy in just a few short years?
In a very extraordinary way, in a very ordinary way. And I mean, he had a little way of holiness that's hard to describe because it started when he was very young. He just decided that he wanted to be friends with Jesus, and that meant going to the Eucharist and going to Mass. And they developed that relationship over a long period of time, doing all the things any of us are capable of doing but find difficult, he found easy to do. And I think that devotion, especially to the Eucharist, led him down a path where holiness became easier and easier as he got older. And I can only imagine how much he has accomplished in his short life. We're already seeing more and more fruits of it. But I would say the big secret is the Eucharist and doing the ordinary things with great charity and great love.
So I was going to ask you who the book is geared towards, but the author, Father Will Conker, wrote in his introduction that Carlo would be the first saint to enter heaven with a cell phone in his hand. So it seems everyone can relate to him, young or old. Even Pope Francis said Carlo should be an example for young people. So by reading this book, what can we learn from him?
Well, a big thing people will learn is exactly that, how contemporary he was. He died in 2006. He's in my generation, the millennial generation. He's the same age as my wife, and it's interesting to think about. Today would be his 30th birthday, of course. He really loved building websites and seeing what the internet could do and playing around on it. I played around on the internet too at his age, but he did things productively with his internet time. And yeah, so he's a unique saint in so many ways, in that he's so close to us and we can see so much familiarity. Then when you get down to his holiness, it starts to become a challenge again, but it's also, he's not doing anything that extraordinary at the end of it. It was the love he brought to it that really set him apart.
All right, so what's one thing you could tell us about Carlo's childhood that we may not know?
Well, I mentioned that he went to Mass frequently, but also about him playing the PlayStation. He loved PlayStation, as I still do in my late 30s. I love my PlayStation, but he would limit himself to an hour or sometimes half an hour a week, because as much as he loved it, he knew he had other things he needed to work on and other things he needed to build. So his parents had no involvement in that. They didn't say, okay, only an hour on the PlayStation, kid. He did it himself and stuck to it. Yeah, a parent's dream, isn't it?
Yeah, my kids can learn from that. You know, it seems Carlo was a bit of a loner as a teen. I want to read an excerpt from the book. It says, Carlo was also often alone when he went to church, but in reality, he was never alone in his heart. Deep down, Carlo always lived in the presence of God, whom he considered to be his best friend. You touched on it a little bit, but talk about his relationship with God.
Absolutely. As I said, he looked for the heart of Jesus, which he found in the Eucharist. He called the Eucharist his highway to heaven. Even long after he had passed away from us over the shutdown, many churches who couldn't have regular Mass were putting up these wonderful exhibitions about Eucharistic miracles to help people through these trying times. And when we didn't have our regular community, we could still remember, through the work of Blessed Carlos, long before we knew what COVID even was, we could remember these Eucharistic miracles where Jesus made himself very clearly present in the Eucharist. And so Blessed Carlos saw that. He became more enamored with the Eucharist. And the more time he spent in there talking and praying and adoring the Eucharist, the more he found a friendship and a kinship with Jesus that cured a lot of that teenage loneliness I think we all struggle with to some degree.
Wow, well, it sounds like a fascinating book. Michael Lichens, editor of Catholic Exchange, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Millennial in Paradise is set to be released on June 22nd. You can buy it at sophiainstitute.com. The Papal Foundation is distributing more than $9 million in grants to dioceses in 64 countries within the coming year, citing Pope Francis's call to rebuild church buildings when he was in Iraq. The foundation will help finance the construction and repair of church and school buildings. The grants will also go towards environmental initiatives and the education of children in need. An Israeli state watchdog group will investigate a religious festival stampede that killed at least 45 people. The country's parliament is holding a memorial as questions and criticisms grow. ELLIOT GOTKINE is in Jerusalem with the latest.
A day of national mourning across Israel, flags flying at half-mast here at the Knesset or Parliament, and also on other public buildings, Israeli army bases and Israeli missions around the world. 45 people were killed in the stampede that took place in northern Israel in the early hours of Friday morning. All of those bodies have now been identified and funerals have begun. According to someone with familiarity with the list of fatalities, it's expected that at least 5 of them were US citizens. Around a dozen people remain ill in hospital, 2 of them seriously. And amid the sadness and sorrow, questions are being asked as to how this could have happened in the first place and who was responsible. The police has launched an internal inquiry. The Attorney General has launched an inquiry looking into possible criminal negligence on the part of the police. And reports have emerged of warnings that went unheeded in previous years. Indeed, the former head of the regional council that includes Mount Meron, where the disaster happened, says that it was a ticking time bomb and that on one occasion he even issued a warrant to have it shut down, but that because of political pressure, that warrant could not be enforced. The Public Security Minister, Amir Ohana, an ally of Prime Minister Netanyahu, he says that he takes responsibility but doesn't accept the blame, saying that this could have happened in any of previous years when there were many, many more thousands of people attending this event, and calls now for a full state inquiry to understand all the facts that led up to and included this event and the deaths of those 45 people. This is ELLIOT GOTKINE in Jerusalem.
Still to come on Currents News, a miraculous event takes place a day later than it usually does, and a new construction project is coming to the Colosseum in Rome. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The blood of St. Januarius liquefied over the weekend. Video shows a Monsignor displaying the reliquary, holding the blood and turning it to show the blood turned from solid to liquid. It usually happens annually on the afternoon of the first Saturday in May, but this year it happened on the second day of prayer in honor of the patron saint of Naples. Rome's iconic Colosseum will get a new floor as part of a construction project. The renovation will let visitors see the ancient structure as it was thousands of years ago. The floor was taken away in the 19th century to get a view of the passageways underneath. The $22 million sustainable construction project will largely restore the structure to its previous condition, and it will allow ancient hatches, hoists, and machinery that were used to bring men and animals up to the floor to work again. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.